Hi, Wilbon. Back in the attic. Here we go. Let us start with the NBA. Mark Berman of the New York Post has a story in which he says the NBA really is going to want to crown a champion this year. A lot of scenarios are out there in play. One of them has all the teams staying in the same city, playing all the games in the same spot, all the playoff games, no fans in the stands. The series themselves, Mike, could shrink to, say, 2 games out of 3. Las Vegas has obviously been mentioned because there are so many hotels. Also Atlantic City. Also, if I have this right, Orlando and the Bahamas. Is there anything in this which particularly intrigues you?
Tony, intrigues, I don't know. I mean, I've been to Summer League as recently as this past summer in Las Vegas. And it's certainly interesting to have all the teams. Obviously, you don't really have the stars unless they're just coming to watch, like, LeBron will pop up and Kevin Durant, and they'll watch the teams they're playing for, the young guys who are trying to make the team or impress. And, there's a certain coolness to it when it's Summer League. I mean, the playoffs, I guess it could have that sort of cachet. I mean, Vegas and the Bahamas are the only ones that when I hear this sort of make any sense. And I mentioned this to you yesterday about Vegas having been that floated and certain people shoot it down and certain people embrace it. Tone, I don't know. Look, we're so far out still that I don't know. Maybe they can have actual in-arena playoff games. Maybe not. And the NBA has to prepare for everything. So I guess intrigue on a 1 to 10 scale, maybe a 4. What about you?
Yeah, well, I will watch it. I mean, there's no sports. If they put something on, even without fans, I'm going to watch this. But I will say this. I think 2 out of 3 is very exciting, but it wouldn't work for me on a final. You'd have to give me at least 3 out of 5 in a final situation. And I would feel like, Mike, because of the Summer League experience, I would feel this is sort of like Summer League, sort of a scrimmage of sorts. It would not have the grandeur to me of what the NBA ought to have for a championship. And I might get a little bit afraid, Mike, that they were just doing it for money.
Tone, you know what? I hadn't thought about that last part, and I would understand if that was the case. But, Tony, no, it's the kind of thing where you think people are going to say, well, that needs to have an asterisk. If you're not playing this, home sites, home arenas, things that we associate absolutely with NBA playoffs or NHL playoffs if they had to do something similar. Is it an asterisk situation? Are people going to dismiss it 10 years down the road? I don't think a league wants to get into it if it can anticipate that. But what the hell can we anticipate now anyway appropriately? It's hard to anticipate anything.
Let me get to the thing that I mentioned the other day. If you're talking about June or July or August, the NBA shut the whole league down based on one positive test for the virus. You put all these players together in June, July, or August, you really think there's going to be no test to a coach, a staff guy, a player, and it shuts down right there. It does.
Yeah. No, Tony, that's a great point. They're going to have to consider all things that we're not even thinking of right now. We're going to move to the NCAA for a second, which voted Monday to give an extra year of eligibility to all spring sport athletes, Tony. So that includes sports including lacrosse, baseball, golf, softball, tennis, the spring sports. That's not the winter sports, so people who missed the end of their basketball tournaments and things like that are not included. But spring sport athletes, Tony, there are a whole lot of considerations in this too, which we'll get to. But do you and I, which we pound on the NCAA pretty regularly, do we have to give them a little pat on the back for this?
Yeah, we don't pound on the NCAA pretty regularly. You pound on the NCAA pretty regularly. You compare them all the time to Barney Fife, which is a reference that nobody under 50 gets anymore. But in this particular case, they have done a very good thing, and they do deserve credit. But, and there's a large but here, we are not talking about revenue-producing sports. We're not talking about basketball and football where people get full scholarships. We're talking about a lot of walk-ons and a lot of people who maybe get partial scholarships for these spring sports, which means, Mike, that they or their families are going to have to go for an extra year of tuition. And you have to consider that a lot of people are going to say, I'd love to stay and play, but I got to get on with my life because I don't have this kind of money.
You're right, Tony, on all those. But yes, as someone who pounds the NCAA regularly, let me give them a standing ovation for this. They didn't choose the sports. They're saying the people who missed their entire season, particularly the seniors who missed their entire season, this is an option for you. It's not mandatory. And Tony, you're right. And how about the coaches who have to figure out, wait a minute, I recruited 3 freshmen who are going to come in here. And so now how are we going to further divide up scholarships, although the NCAA and schools can help? The richer schools will have an easier time of this?
Mike, they got to allow people to transfer. If I sign up to play lacrosse someplace and the seniors come back and the sophomores and the juniors come back and I don't get time, you've got to let me go somewhere else, right? I mean, you can't hold me to that commitment if suddenly the system is so clogged that I get no playing time.
Tone, lots of problems like these, but it's worth it. It is worth. This is the NCAA doing the right thing first, and then we'll figure out all the bumps in the road down the road.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Let us turn now to pro football and Jameis Winston and his teammate, former teammate Chris Godwin, who caught all those passes on Tampa from Jameis Winston, who is now saying, hey, you're giving him too much blame. He told the boardroom, I'm not familiar with the work of the boardroom, but he told the boardroom that the receivers made a lot of mistakes, all right, including himself, and that some of these interceptions are not Jameis Winston's fault. With that in mind, Wilbon, do you agree with this assessment? And what sort of future are you seeing now in the NFL for Jameis Winston?
Tony, I'm glad I listened to a lot of Godwin's segment because, first of all, he's my new favorite guy, in the NFL, Chris Godwin, for a lot of reasons. I'm sure we'll get to the Tom Brady one later. But, Tony, I just think he makes a great point. Look, he says during his segment, Jameis has made some bad judgments. Let's not try to absolve him of all blame here. But some of these things were receivers, including himself, making the wrong read. Some of it's the risky nature of that particular offense, which really is a gambler's offense, as we've talked about in relation to the people that he's worked with in the past, and Tom Brady's participation and whether they'll change that offense in Tampa coming up. So, Tony, there's more nuance in it and there's more subtlety in it than just, these weren't Jameis's fault. That's not what he says. Quarterbacks get too much credit. They often get too much blame. And I think he makes some legitimate points in this.
There's a really cool little statistic that I was made aware of today, that people who've had bad seasons, statistically bad seasons, maybe thrown a lot of interceptions or lost the ball. Bruce Arians, in his first year with Andrew Luck, in his first year with Carson Palmer, and obviously this past year in his first year with Jameis Winston, they all had this problem, which makes me fear a little bit for Tom Brady in his first year with Bruce Arians, because it's an offense that in your first year you don't adapt to necessarily. Look, I think Jameis Winston, 30 interceptions is terrible. He threw for 5,000 yards. Are you kidding me? He's a starter in this league in the right spot. Now, he's not going to be a starter this year. He'll back somebody up, but he'll get a chance. Everybody gets a chance. He could be Ryan Tannehill at another team, don't you think?
Or better, Tony. But here's the thing. Winston just he had the 130 year, which everybody obsesses over. Tone, he's got more turnovers almost every year in his 5 seasons than anybody else. And if you add the 5, his turnovers are staggering. So it's not just with Arians. He's had this problem. He's going to personally have to get better. And again, Godwin wasn't avoiding that point, but it's one of the points that's probably getting lost in the larger discussion.
Let me just get to one thing that you mentioned earlier. Godwin, to his credit, gave Tom Brady number 12. Didn't hold him up for money. Gave him number 12 out of respect and took number 14 himself, which is a great gesture.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.